So when it comes to manga, it is pretty hard for me to pick out favorites because my experience with manga is very different than it is with anime. There are some manga who, as a series, might not be as good as others, but I still want to rank highly for personal reasons, and so I think that is exactly what I'm going to do. So strap in and watch as we rank the best 5 manga in my opinion. Alright, the first manga on this list is Aoi Ai. This manga is really good, however its quality isn't the reason I'm putting it on this list, although I will go into detail on this series. But the reason this manga is on this list is because it is the manga I had to go on the hardest hunt to find volumes for a reasonable price. It took a while to collect them all, but it was a really satisfying journey to collect every volume and I won't forget it. But the manga is also really good and I will give you examples why. Firstly, despite the story being a harem, it is actually pretty mature and doesn't go into the normal route that most harem manga do. We see it take its full form with its emotional depth combined with its comedic elements that really makes it shine. The characters are also great. There isn't a single character in the harem that I hate. Each one of them has a role to play in the story and they play it beautifully. It's honestly really cool to see. The main character is also thankfully not a blank slate and actually has a personality to speak of. He makes mistakes, grows, and develops as a person alongside the other characters. The art style also isn't bad. I wouldn't say it's the best ever, but the art style in the manga is pretty good and definitely makes the story easy to read. Speaking of the story for a harem manga is interesting for sure. Firstly, the main guy and girl get together immediately, so there is no beating around the bush on who is going to win. We know that right from the beginning, which makes the story more interesting as they have to navigate hiding their relationship from the others in order not to hurt feelings and ruin reputations. This manga also has a few surprising twists and turns that make it fun to read, so I definitely recommend this manga if you are looking for a good harem manga to read that is a bit more mature and honest than most. So the next manga on this list is one I struggle to recommend to people, but not because it's bad. The opposite actually. It is so good that if you aren't in the right headspace to read the manga, then it won't do you any good. This manga is Oyasumi Punpun. If you have read this manga, then you definitely understand why this manga is placed on this list. This is an incredibly dark story about the life of Punpun and just how a series of mistakes in life can make your life take a drastic turn for the worse. We see time and time again that the decisions Punpun makes leads him to the worst possible outcome. This manga is also incredibly powerful in its storytelling by adding elements that people can relate to. Not everything in the story people can relate to, but I'm sure you can find at least one aspect of the story that can relate to, and that makes this message so powerful. The art style being very stylized and creepy also works extremely well, especially with the contrast of Punpun and his family being birds. The story is powerful, the artwork is great, and the character writing is insanely good. I'm not going to say the characters are good because that would be a false statement. Almost every character in this manga is a piece of shit in some way, shape, or form, but that is also because most of them are broken individuals who have gone through a lot of struggles in their lives and so they lash out. Everything this manga does culminates in one of the most powerful but also one of the most dark and depressing stories you could ever read, and that in itself is what makes this manga great. Next up may be a series some don't expect, especially with another similar series usually being considered better. But Bloody the Immortal is just such a good manga that I had to put it on this list instead of Vagabond, which is a manga I haven't even read yet, so it can't be here. Bloody the Immortal's story is a very dark and interesting story of revenge and how it can consume your life in the worst ways possible. We see just how far some of these characters will go for what they want. Their story is very gritty and raw, and it can be brutal to those who are squeamish. I love the quieter moments in this manga as well. It is nice to have moments where we can sit down and enjoy the characters' personalities before things get completely out of hand. Bloody the Immortal has such good art in it as well. It is very rough and gritty and looks almost dirty, and it fits this type of story very well. And again, if you're squeamish, the artwork isn't going to do you any favors, that's for sure. I love how this story is able to have such a wide cast of characters and each one of them being so well written and thought out that it really gets you invested in each of their stories in a way that you don't often see in storytelling. Bloody the Immortal is a story that constantly flips perspective away from the main characters to focus on some of the other stuff going around the world. This helps us to expand the story and to tie everything together into a cohesive story. I also really love how the antagonist of the story isn't a one-dimensional villain and actually has a purpose for his actions even if it is still evil. We actually get inside of his head for a large chunk of the story, which really gets you to understand him as a person. Bloody the Immortal is genuinely one of the greatest stories I have had the pleasure of experiencing through its insane story writing and its ability to tie every single character into the story in a realistic and awesome way. Alright, next up is one that if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you won't be too surprised to see this manga here, and that is Bloom Into You. This is a really good Yuri manga that has actually had me questioning myself and has made me realize a lot of things about myself. This story explores things that most other manga don't even touch, which is really nice and makes for a really good story. Plus, it is cool to see the struggles of what it is like to be a lesbian in Japan and how that can affect you. This story is just so good and I always give it a reread every year for Pride Month because I love it that much. The character writing in it is also great. We have 3 main characters and 2 or 3 others that we can call prominent side characters, and each character has a role to play and they play it beautifully. We get to see the slow realization that Yu loves Nanami as we go through the story. And during her realization story, we see her questioning herself a lot and wondering if she can even love people at all, and that just hits really hard in the story. Bloom Into You just does such an incredible job at portraying the themes and topics it wants to convey through its artwork and storytelling ability, and that is why I absolutely love this manga so much and will continue to reread it every year. And lastly, I think this will come as no surprise to those of you who have been watching their videos for a while, but One Piece is the number one here, and I don't even think I really need to explain why, but obviously I will. One Piece has this ability to have so many different moving pieces all at once, and it doesn't feel overwhelming or confusing in any way, and that is because of Oda's ability to write these pieces and how he implements them into the story. The world building in One Piece is also the best there ever was. Like, it's crazy how most of the hype chapters in One Piece aren't the fighting chapters, but the lore chapters, and that is because Oda has gotten us so invested in his world that we want to learn everything there is to know about it, so we can understand more about our favorite characters and their motivations. And don't even get me started on the characters, because there are so many lovable characters in One Piece, from the Straw Hats to Shanks and his crew, as well as characters like some of the fishmen or even the Shichibukai. They are all super cool and interesting, and every character has something that makes them really cool, and if you're a named character, then you probably have an epic backstory as well. We get to see and understand so much about the One Piece world through the characters and seeing how they interact. Oda is a master of world building and character writing, and his passion really shines through in his work. One Piece is the greatest manga of all time in my opinion, and that might change once I read Berserk, but we'll have to wait and see. Alright, so that was my list of my favorite manga. This list could definitely change with time, but as of right now, this is the list. Let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments below, and if you liked the video, maybe think about dropping a like, and subscribing as well, it helps out a ton. And if you do decide to join the community, then I guess I'll see you next week with another video. Bye.